Imagine for just a second standing next to a person who is so massive, so unbelievably imposing that you literally feel like a tiny grasshopper just resting on their finger. Crazy, right? Well, according to the ancient book of Numbers, that's exactly how Israelite scouts felt when they ran into a terrifying, towering group of people known as the descendants of Anak, who were actually linked to the legendary Nephilim. It's this wild image of profound intimidation, and it perfectly sets the stage for one of the most fascinating ancient mysteries we have on record. We're talking about a story of literal giants, intense violence, and a catastrophic event that completely reset human history. Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're not just reading ancient myths. No, we're taking a highly investigative, multidisciplinary approach to an incredible story. We're actually going to treat the Great Flood and the legendary ark that survived it as a historical cold case. By layering ancient texts right alongside modern naval engineering and recent geological surveys, we're going to try to piece together what might have actually happened thousands of years ago. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap. First, before the flood giants. Then, engineering an ancient megaship. After that, the Duru-Pinar Ark discovery. And finally, relic or geological anomaly. Let's get into it. Section 1. Before the flood. Giants. So before we even start talking about floodwaters, we absolutely have to investigate the mysterious and honestly, often completely misunderstood catalyst for the whole event. According to the ancient texts of Genesis, the pre-flood earth was literally filled with violence, largely driven by a group known as the Nephilim. Now that name roughly translates to the fallen ones or those who cause others to fall down. They're described as the heroes of old, men of renown. But listen, they weren't heroes in the way we think of them today. They were tyrants. These were colossal, physically dominant brawlers who maintained this reign of absolute terror, leading to a total moral breakdown of the ancient world. But where did they even come from? Well, the texts claim they were the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. And man, that one phrase, sons of God, has sparked intense academic debate for centuries. There are basically three primary theories out there about who they actually were. The oldest view, which was held by the first-century historian Josephus and early church fathers, takes it completely literally. Fallen angels crossing boundaries to intermarry with human women, creating a bizarre hybrid race. Then there's the second theory. This one's very popular in modern evangelical circles. It argues that this simply refers to the righteous human lineage of Seth marrying the ungodly lineage of Cain, resulting in a deeply corrupted society. And finally, the third view suggests these were ancient dynastic rulers or kings, just men totally obsessed with power, marrying commoners and building ruthless empires. Look, we aren't here to pick a side. We just want to show that this union, whatever it actually was, sparked a period of unprecedented human cruelty. And this brilliantly illustrates the mindset of that ancient era. What you're seeing is an ancient Assyrian relief showing a hero just casually holding a captured lion. Barehanded. I mean, just think about the sheer absurdity and the raw strength it takes to casually hold a wild lion like it's a house cat. It perfectly captures the ancient world's absolute obsession with raw physical strength, violence, and dominance. To be a man of renown back then meant being a conqueror, a killer, a literal giant among men. And it was this specific, overwhelming culture of violence that, according to the source texts, forced a divine intervention, the Great Flood. Which brings us to Section 2, Engineering an Ancient Megaship. Okay, so the judgment is set. Now let's shift our investigation from those ancient textual motives to the actual, scientific blueprint of the survival vessel itself. For centuries, people have pictured Noah's Ark as this cute, primitive, bathtub-like raft with giraffes poking their heads out, but the actual specifications listed in Genesis tell a completely different story. The text lays out exact dimensions, 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. Now, if we use the standard ancient Egyptian cubit, which is about 52.4 centimeters, we are looking at a megaship roughly 157 meters long. That is massive. In the early 1990s, a team of serious naval engineers from South Korea, led by Dr. S.W. Hong, decided to treat these ancient specs as a literal maritime blueprint. They actually built scale models and subjected them to rigorous modern hydrodynamic testing in wave tanks. And the results? Absolutely staggering. This South Korean engineering study proved that a vessel built to these exact ancient proportions wouldn't just float, it could withstand punishing 30-meter-high waves without capsizing or breaking apart. To put that into perspective for you, a 30-meter wave is roughly the height of a 10-story building. That is serious survival capability. The engineers concluded that the Ark's dimensions provided a perfect balance, offering superior stability, durability, and safety in stormy conditions. Basically, if a ship is too long, it snaps under the stress of the waves. Too wide, and it rolls violently. Too tall, and it just capsizes. But this ancient ratio, it hit the absolute structural sweet spot, far, far exceeding the capabilities of anything we'd consider a primitive raft. Honestly, it reveals a highly advanced understanding of naval architecture, hidden inside a text that is thousands of years old. Moving on to Section 3, the Darupanar Ark Discovery. So, knowing that the design was mathematically sound, we have to ask the obvious question. Did a ship this massive actually leave a physical trace? Let's bring our investigation to the present day and look at a very specific geological formation near Mount Ararat in Turkey. Now, the story of the Darupanar site spans decades. It was first noticed back in 1959 by a Turkish army captain named İlhan Darupanar. He spotted this unusual boat-like shape in an aerial mapping photograph. Later, in the late 70s, an explorer named Ron Wyatt brought massive public attention to the site. But what makes this really compelling today is that between 2021 and 2024, a joint team from Turkish and American universities went back to the site. And this time, they were armed with high-tech tools like ground-penetrating radar to see exactly what lies beneath the surface. Now, what's really interesting about this is the physical evidence they've uncovered. First off, the formation is 163 meters long. That is astonishingly close to the 157-meter scale of the biblical ark. Even more surprising, sitting at an altitude of 2,000 meters above sea level, researchers actually found marine sediment, clay, and even traces of marine mollusks. No way, right? They also claim to have found traces of resin, which is highly reminiscent of the pitch used to waterproof ancient gopher wood. And to top it all off, carbon-14 dating of soil and rock samples places the activity at this site right in the 3,500 to 5,000-year-old window, which, you guessed it, aligns perfectly with the Bronze Age timeline of the Great Flood. Let's look at Section 4, relic or geological anomaly. Okay, so it's an incredibly compelling list of evidence, for sure. But like in any good cold case, we have to cross-examine our findings. We have to ask, is this truly the fossilized relic of the Ark, or are we just looking at a very, very deceptive geological anomaly? Let's weigh the arguments impartially here. Proponents of the Ark theory point directly to their recent ground-penetrating radar data. They claim it clearly shows symmetrical, angular inner structures buried under the Earth, lines that look exactly like the internal compartments of a ship. However, the scientific rebuttal from modern geologists, like Professor Lawrence Collins and Dr. Andrew Snelling, is incredibly strict on the timeline. They point out that the Darupanar structure is actually largely made of limonite ore, and the natural process of wood fossilizing into that specific kind of rock, well, that takes millions of years, not the mere 5,000 years suggested by the biblical timeline. Essentially, these geologists argue that the boat shape is entirely a trick of nature. You see, the region around Mount Ararat is highly volcanic and very seismically active. They suggest that a massive volcanic landslide, known as a mudflow, basically draped over a rigid ridge of rock. Then, as erosion washed away the softer dirt over time, it left behind what's called a witness hill. And this hill just so happens to have a streamlined, aerodynamic shape that perfectly mimics a ship's hull. What about the marine sediment, you ask? Well, they say that could just be the remnants of an ancient, localized lake that got pushed upward by tectonic plates over millions of years. So, where does that leave our investigation? Well, on one hand, we have this ancient engineering blueprint that is scientifically flawless, paired with a massive, ship-shaped footprint matching those exact dimensions, just sitting there in the mountains of Turkey. But on the other hand, we have the rigid laws of geology pointing to a brilliant yet entirely natural coincidence. Here's the thing, though. Even if the Darupanar site isn't the physical Ark, historians note that nearly every ancient culture across the globe, from Mesopotamia to the Americas, has a profound shared legend of a catastrophic flood. It really forces us to ask the ultimate question. Are we looking at the physical remains of a great ship, or are we staring at a geological monument that just perfectly mirrors a deeply ingrained collective human trauma from the end of the last ice age? It's a mystery that, at least for now, remains completely unsolved. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the world around you.